All right. Good morning, everyone. It might not be morning where you're listening to this. Yat bene. My name is Melanie Yazi, co-founder of Red Media, helped to establish the press that's launching this historic book that's launching today on July 1st of 2025. This is truly an important and historic moment. For Red Media, but I think for the Native liberation struggle and the Native liberation movement. We're incredibly honored to be joined by John Redhouse and Carol Wright, publishing this book you see back here, Bordertown Clashes, Resource Wars, Contested Territories, The Four Corners in the Turbulent 1970s is the book that we're launching today. The reason why I say that this book is historic and incredibly momentous and important, as John himself has said to me in several interviews that I've done with him, this is the very first book of its kind that's ever been published by a Native revolutionary, a Native intellectual who was part of Red Power in the 1970s. The book covers that decade of the 1970s when John was really at the height of his activism as a young Dene man and a young Dene freedom fighter. And, as he says, Red Power, often when we think about Red Power in that particular decade, that important decade of struggle, we think about the American Indian movement, right? We think about these very important Red Power organizations. But something that a lot of people don't know is actually Red Power started in the Southwest where we're from. I'm a citizen of the Navajo Nation. John himself is Navajo or Dene grandfather, our grandfather in the movement. And so this is the first book of its kind from somebody who was very instrumental in that struggle for Red Power. The origins of Red Power in the Southwest to be written about that region and the important victories, right, and the important struggles that our relatives were engaged in at that time in this region that have often been overlooked, actually, in the histories that we tell ourselves as Native people about Red Power, but certainly most of the histories actually about that period have been written by white intellectuals, whether they're white historians, journalists who have distorted, I think, the history. And so this is why this book is so important and why we wanted to bring it forward, right, as an actual book, because it is the first of its kind, written by somebody like John. We hope to publish more of John's work. People may not know John Redhouse. They may not know John Redhouse. And that's because along with Carol, his partner, his wife, they've self-published everything John has ever written. I first encountered John's work in the archive. He donated all of his work to the Center for Southwest Research at the University of New Mexico in 2013. I was writing my dissertation. I finished my PhD in 2016. And I remember going through every single item and everything John wrote that was in his archive. I did my PhD at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. And I had never encountered somebody like John in writing, the way that he wrote, as a true intellectual of the movement, as an intellectual of the struggle. I'm a trained academic, and academics don't write the same way, that John does. And that's also what's really unique and important about this book that we're launching today. It's written by somebody who is in the movement and who understands things from that perspective. And only somebody who comes from that perspective and that position can write in the way that John does. And so I met John in 2013 at an event at the University of New Mexico about water rights that Dr. Jennifer Nez-Dennett-Dale, who is my mentor, who wrote the foreword to this book, organized. And I remember I met John for the first time in person and heard him speak. And, from that point, then to going through his archives and, I've been in conversation with John's work for over a decade, I guess is what I'm saying, even though I've only met John maybe a few times, 3 or 4 times at this point. But I feel like I know him. He's a kindred spirit, in this long struggle for Native liberation. And so it is truly my honor to be here today, to be in conversation with John and with Carol, to have kind of shepherded this book into publication, because this book was originally a memoir that John self-published in 2014. I first encountered the memoir, the manuscript, in John's archive, his collection at the Center for Southwest Research. And that was in 2014, I think 2014, 2015, not too long after he finished it. And so it's been a decade of conversation with Dr. Jennifer Dennett-Dale Another colleague of mine at UNM, David Correa, as well as John, to finally get us to this place here on July 1st of 2025, where we're actually publishing it for the first time as a book. It's been a long time coming, and actually we should have done this sooner. But right, with Red Media, we did not have the capacity yet because we didn't have a press and an imprint with common notions yet to do this. And so it really is a beautiful moment to be able to do this, to have control as a native-led publishing project, to be able to publish this kind of work that, frankly, a lot of other presses probably wouldn't publish these kinds of things. Native people are very marginalized still within the publishing industry, and certainly Native people who are radicals and revolutionaries like John, they probably get turned away, right? They don't have a lot of avenues for speaking these kinds of histories and truths. And so we're very honored, Red Media is very honored to be able to publish this kind of work, and we hope to continue to publish these kinds of works, not just from John, but from elders in the movement, but the future voices, right? Who, I mean, we call ourselves revolutionaries and freedom fighters, but really we're just trying to be ourselves as Native people, just trying to protect the land and the water, which hopefully we can talk a little bit more about today. We just love our people. We love our people. We love the land that we have always had a relationship with, regardless of whether or not the United States claims possession over it. And we have a certainty that we will be here into the future, all the generations to come, and we will thrive as a people despite colonialism and conquest and what it has tried to do to us. And so this is how we came to this project. This is how I came to this project. John was kind enough to ask me to write the introduction to the book, and so I did. And he's truly inspired me to be, I call him a warrior intellectual. He is the person I have really modeled my own work after, increasingly as I've come into more maturity as both an activist as well as an intellectual myself. And so, again, it's just truly an honor to be here and to be in conversation with you, John. If you would like to introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you, Melanie.
We'll start there.
John Redhouse. I'm a Navajo and Ute Mountain Ute. My mother was half Ute, and her clan was Totochitni. And so my maternal clan is Totochitni. And that is the Bitterwater clan. I was born and raised in Farmington, New Mexico, which is a pretty rough town, pretty rough border town. If you are Native American, if you got dark skin, it's a racist, exploitative border town. And my life experience there, the first 18 years, was formative in my later activist career. There were many defining moments, and that radicalized me, and I had a lot of hate and anger in me. But fortunately, the Red Power movement, in the form of the National Indian Youth Council, radicalized that hatred, that anger, and that hatred, and put me on a path through advocacy and activism. And it ultimately that goes back to why I became an activist, why I made it my life's work. And I love my people. I care about my people. I want to work and fight for Native people for the rest of my life. That's what I said when I was 21. I was ready to start organizing. I was ready to assume leadership positions in activist organizations. And I continued that work, the path of advocacy and activism, and that continued for another 40 years. And then I retired. I wanted to write not only this book, but other books that I'd been thinking about for a long time, to put it into print, to put it into my collection at the University of New Mexico Center for Southwest Research, as part of my legacy and my contribution to the ongoing movement, to the tradition of resistance and liberation, and put it in a tangible form. And so Red Nation and Red Media certainly has been instrumental in realizing that vision I had for the purposes and uses of my work. Why I became an activist, as I later matured and began more thoughtful and more intellectual, I saw that it was my purpose and responsibility in life. It didn't just happen. There were formative events, to be sure, but as I became more thoughtful and articulate, then I was able to frame it in a better way, I guess, to make it more understanding and more meaningful. So that's that's who I am and what my purpose and responsibility in life and what my life work has come to be.
Thank you so much, John. Carol, would you like to introduce yourself?
What?
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. My name is Carol Wright, and I'm a Western Shoshone. I guess you'd say I'm originally from Smoky Valley, which is where my father was from, and my mother, my grandfather and grandmother were from. I moved to Pyramid Lake, I believe in 66 or 67. And I was thinking about what John was telling me to kind of get started on what I was doing, that it occurred to me it all started with a little black typewriter, little black Royal portable, about yay big, and our community developer at the time, who came by the house and saw it sitting there, and without even asking me if I knew how to type, she says, "Can you type up my monthly report?" So I said, "Sure." And so we sat down and started putting it together. Then we had a lot of fun with it. I mean, it was serious, and she explained what she was doing for the community and why some parts won't work. And in any case, after a bit, it became kind of like the highlight of the monthly Intertribal Council meetings. They look forward to the Pyramid Lake Community Development Report because we would enhance it, and we did all kinds of wonderful things with it. But we also noticed, this is when the water problems with the tribe and their effort to save their lake became quite apparent. And we noticed we always got the morning paper, which was the Nevada State Journal, and we would notice mistakes about the situation, the overall situation. And several times we wrote letters to the editor saying, okay, this is what's wrong with what you're saying here about why the tribe wants to save their lake. And you keep forgetting that the lake dropped 60 feet in 60 years, so to speak, because of the dam, the Derby Dam, that diverted all the water down to the Fallon area where they had ranches and farms and stuff. But and then I got questioned. At the time, myself and another individual were the only two non-Pyramid Lake Paiutes living on the reservation here. And I got questioned as to why I was interested in, and I pointed to my kids, because my kids, that was their legacy. That was what they're going to inherit. and we don't want them to inherit a big mud flat out here like Winnemucca Lake. So anyway, I got into editing. I was asked to take over the Native Nevadan, which is a statewide Indian newspaper. And the first couple of months, I didn't do very much, primarily just to get the feel of what was going on. And then once I got my feet wet, so to speak, I started in on the water rights question. And we had the outlet. The chairman, fortunately, could see that I could be used, so to speak. So he got the tribal attorney to start giving me these legal briefs as it pertained to the lawsuit that was going on, or was going to start, or was on already in parts of it. And I had to learn how to read legalese and then translate it so that my mother-in-law could understand what it was about. She was the important part of this whole thing. If she didn't understand it, I would have to go back and fix it so that she could. And that helped me to help the people, not only here, but different reservations. They began to understand what was going on out here. And the whole, that's how we began to build the support, because I used that Native Nevadan to publicize what was happening with the tribe and the lake and the different players, good and bad, that were involved. And fortunately, the paper also went into California, and the California Indian Legal Services were the first step up and helped the tribe legally. And then that organization eventually became NARF, Native American Rights Fund. And then the tribe was able to get enough money to hire an attorney. I probably worked for $100 a month. I don't know. It wasn't very much. The tribe was really broke. The people on the council they had jobs, and they were ranchers and electricians and carpenters and whatever, so they didn't work here, they worked in Reno. So they had, a commute. And so the newspaper became very important. And that's how I got all involved in it, not because of my kids, because it's their lake too. And one of these days, they'll realize that, hey, look at all that happened, and hopefully that they'll continue, and they do, as a lot of people do, support saving their lake. And it just, in one of the things I noticed about the Nevada State Journal was they got a lot of their Pyramid Lake information feed from the United Press International. So UPS, or I'm sorry.
UPI?
What's that?
UPI?
UPI, yeah. UPI was the one that fed them the material. And the guys in the journal, they didn't know anything about what was happening. They kind of knew, but not really. So when they noticed that the Nevadan was starting to come out with stuff, they called me, and I went up to see them, and and began with the education part of the Indian side of things, and also with UPI. And UPI was probably the happiest I've ever seen him when he met me and was told why I was there, because he had no clue. And he had enough integrity in his job that he did not want to put out false information. So he was glad to know that I was there to help. And so we also used the journal on a daily basis. That was in the morning paper for Pyramid Lake News. And they taught me. I would watch the state editor grab my copy and red pencil it through and explain to me, and that's how I learned to get into writing better news copy, especially for Pyramid Lake. And so things started happening. We start getting support from California people. The evening paper, the Reno Evening Gazette, kind of supported Pyramid Lake, but not so much as they supported the ranchers and farmers that were taking the water.
Yeah.
And it would have been nice if the Indians just quieted down and let the hippies go on their way, and don't let the hippies come out here and try to raise hell and help them out, But there was so much things happening. All of a sudden, it just kind of exploded, and there we were, And Pyramid Lake was the Interstate Water Compact was another big issue, and the governor to be O'Callahan, he came out in full support of the tribe against the water compact. The thing I remember about that compact is that California Governor Ronald Reagan, Nevada Governor Paul Laxalt met in the middle of Lake Tahoe in a boat and agreed to reduce the inflow into Pyramid Lake by 50%. And that shocked all of us because they had no clue what they had just said. Somehow, because one of the big argument was evaporation. All the water evaporates out of Pyramid Lake. Not like the water doesn't evaporate down in the rancher's place. Just Pyramid Lake, it all evaporates. So it's not worth pushing more water into the lake because it'll evaporate. So that was our solution. Aside from putting a big canopy over the lake.
Dumb. I'm sure settlers tried to think about that idea too. Anyway.
But that was the other solution. And when that hit the fan, then it woke people up. And they went, and California was trying to take a lot of Nevada water. And that in itself woke up a lot of Nevada people. And in any case, we just kept on going with our fight to save the lake, but and then I just kind of got involved in all kinds of little nitty-gritty things that were happening. We went to I did a lot of water rights work, a lot of water. I liked it. It was fun. But I had to put beans on the table, so I found other work also. And because as an activist, which I guess I always was an activist, but when I went to work with the youth council, John and Jerry, was as an investigative journalism teacher. We had 25 kids who all ended up, and it was essentially to improve your research and writing skills. And that's what we did. And we had all 25 go on to become lawyers and tribal council people, and we're really proud of them. And we did a lot of work with John, and but still water rights was still back in my mind, you know, and I kept tabs on different things happening in different parts of the country. But then the big backlash occurred. Was it 1980, John?
It was like, started after the Bolt decision in 1974.
Oh, that's right.
That was regional. And then by 1977, 78, it had become national.
Right. The Bolt decision that gave affirmed fishing rights, Indian fishing rights up in the Northwest. It was, like John said, it was regional. The fishermen up there got all angry because the Indian got special rights, which wasn't special. It was their rights. It was the way it's supposed to be. Then it expanded itself. And pretty soon, the backlash, it evolved into including hunting rights of various tribes, and of course fishing rights and land rights and water rights and any rights that the tribes have. And so I put together a report on that, and we published it in our little youth council newspaper, and then it was picked up by the Yakima Nation Review. Dick LaCourse was a good friend of mine, and we worked together with the Indian Press Association. I was part of I was one of the 10 people that initiated the American Indian Press Association. We put that together in 1970. And so we did the backlash. I mean, that in the Yakima Nation Review, Richard LaCourse did a whole full-page spread on it, and it was picked up by a lot of people. A lot of people read it. They read our little paper on it, and then NCAI had me give a report on it. And our crazy Indian youth people were in the back of the auditorium. It's like, for God, and 300 Indians out there. And they were in the back there, yay, and you know, giving me the old salute and everything. And before I went on stage, I was reminded that it was the first time a woman was invited to speak before the NCAI people.
Really?
That didn't help.
What year was this?
Huh?
What year was this?
This, what, 70?
It was 1977. Yeah, it was the first time a
Okay.
woman address the plenary session of the National Congress of American Indians. It was at the NCAI Midtown Convention in Albuquerque.
Got it. Right on, Carol.
That didn't help me any, but so I gave him a report on that, and I remember looking at Ellen Rowland from Northern Cheyenne and all of his problems he was having with the coal companies, and they're trying to stop the coal people from. I mean, they were having a hard time with their tribe because half wanted the coal monies, the other half wanted to save their reservation. And so I just looked directly at him. I didn't look at anybody else. And he was comforting because he's an older gentleman and it kind of like an uncle, and I zeroed in on him, talked to him. And then I went to Phoenix later after that happened. I went to Phoenix where they held a meeting, and I also talked about the backlash that was occurring. And then we got into water rights, and there was a lot of water rights discussion on different things. Pyramid Lake was part of it. And what resulted, a lot of it had to do with legal strategy. And what it ended up being is that NARF was encouraging compromise, which to me was a dirty word.
When it comes to water rights, it is.
Yes, you got to compromise. No, you don't have to compromise.
No, you don't.
That was my argument, and
Absolutely.
I gotten some good arguments with NARF on that. But that's always been where I was at, was the water and the land and the civil rights. It's the whole sphere of things.
Yep.
So then when we started writing, I used what I learned when I took over the Native Nevadan. I learned to do the back shop work, which was doing page layout on light tables, typesetting equipment, and photo layouts and things like that, all mechanical. That's all now done on computer. Well, this was done mechanically. So that's how John and I survived. Was I did that work, and he did his writing, and he got grants, and he got money, and but it was the mechanics of publishing that put the beans on the table, so to speak. But he kept the interest in the rights and the activism. And I did too, because it was necessary. And if I could teach people how to put together a book like that, that I took from a light table to a computer. It wasn't an easy transition, but it can be done. And there were all kinds of little rules and regulations on doing that. And if it wasn't for him, I would have went crazy, because he would remind me of why we're doing this. I was about ready to say, that's it, no more.
Just throw in the towel.
Yeah. But I'm glad I stuck with it. It allowed us to publish such as, our little booklets and things like that. I learned how to put together those things so a printer could handle it. A regular size printer could, in lieu of, we didn't do Xeroxing because at that time, parts of the page wouldn't print,
Mm.
especially if you did double sided. So I had to work with a printer on how to design a layup so that he could understand how to get it off of his press. And that's how we kept his publishing, John's work to continue.
Mm.
And it was fun. I mean, I enjoyed the mechanics of it all, you know. But it's just it also allowed me to find other publishing outlets for his work, for telling the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what we did. So, but it all started with Pyramid Lake, and it's still going, you know. But it's a lot better,
Huh.
a lot better.
Well, if it all started with Pyramid Lake, we're doing a full circle here because you both live here, you know, long-time contributions to this nation and this community. We're live streaming. I don't know if I forgot to say this earlier, from the Pyramid Lake Museum and Visitor Center. And so there's no better place to launch this remarkable memoir than from here that John wrote, but you've both collaborated on. And it's truly an honor to spend a Tuesday morning with a couple of legends around the struggle. I mean, really, the first woman to address the NCAI, that's something. Yeah, the contributions you both have made to is interesting. I asked you to introduce yourselves, and you both were like, "Oh, this is my name," and then you both talked in length about how much you love your people and your contribution to, you know, the struggle for land and water rights, and that you truly embody. I think, you know, what we talk about a lot in the Red Nation is what it means to be a good relative. It's not really about you as a person, right? It's about, as John said, you used the word legacy. You were saying this about for your children too, you know, Carol, about it's the legacy. And so it all starts with Pyramid Lake, and the struggle to protect the lake because it's sacred, right? And to protect the land. And so it's very fitting, and it's really an honor, I think, to be doing this live stream from here to launch this book. I wanted to ask you, John, thank you, Carol. Thank you for that introduction, but also the history. You know, that history is really important. But John, I wanted you, if you could talk a little bit more about why you became an activist. Yeah, just tell us that story.
Well, the Red Power movement, had been going on since 1492, of course. But the way we refer to it is really the period, you know, the modern Red Power movement, the continuing Red Power movement reached a new level in the 1960s and 1970s. And there are a lot of major high impact issues going on over basic survival issues: land, water, natural resources, religion, culture, and all having to do with our lives and our future as Native peoples. And you're kind of born. You are born into it. Literally, you are born into the struggle. And so, you know, in looking at history, the history of our people since 1492, you find out things like, you know, you do research and you find out that 98% of our people were killed.
Yep.
Since 1492, 98% of our land was taken away. We've always been at war. It's been called the longest war in history, the war against Native people, and it's still going on. Every day, you know, our people are being killed, and it's you know, so it's an extension of that genocide. Every day, our land is being taken, whether it's on the reservation or land that is ancestral or that we still have claim to. So, and those are the elements of war. And so, in the late 1960s, I looked around and saw the situation that was it was really a question of ultimately was survival or genocide. And I said to myself, my people are at war, and so I too am at war. And so that and that positioned me to take up the struggle and my life's work, and and so I joined the Red Power movement, the National Indian Youth Council. That was the main organization at that time. The American Indian Movement, the United Native Americans, the Alcatraz Group, the Indians of all tribes, they came later. It was NIYC and the great leadership that they had: Herb Blatchford, Clyde Warrior, Mel Tom, Shirley Hill, Hank Adams, and other legends. They were my heroes, and they had great thoughts and they had great words, and they were about direct action, and they were the vanguards. They showed great leadership, and they referred to themselves as warriors because we are in a state of war. We've always been in a state of war since 1492. And so, I wanted to be with those people. I shared with their vision a greater Indian America. We are remnants of a warrior society. Let's raise some hell, as Clyde Warrior said. Let's make a difference. This generation, that was his challenge to his generation, that was part of his address to the National Indian Youth Council when they reelected him as president. And he was very bold. He was a great leader. He spoke for all of us. He was very articulate, very intelligent, and he died much too soon. But the words that he said, it really brought out the best in you. It really inspired you, and the way he articulated the vision, and so I felt like home when I was with my NIYC brothers and sisters at our gatherings, or when we held a intertribal action, or when we were at our annual meetings, and as a youth, as a teenager, I felt these are my people. And here with the youth council, the youth council at that time was very strong, and particularly strong here in Nevada also. We had 55 chapters for 15,000 youth, and we were growing. And the work of the youth council at that time was building leadership. So we had many chapters and many projects across the nation, not only the United States, but also in Canada too. There was a Canadian Indian Youth Council. And I wanted to be with my comrades in struggle. And when I was there, I felt like home. And so the anger and the hatred that I had as a youth and growing up in a hostile border town, it was politicized and translated into being an effective member of the youth council, being an effective member of the Red Power movement, and making a true difference in people's lives, a difference a change that people can see and feel. And I felt that it was almost like destiny there. So instead of being in a state of anger and hatred, the negative self-destruction that can come from that, I found a better way to use that anger in fueling my drive and my passion in my life's work. So I have the National Indian Youth Council for saving my life from self-destruction to something better than that, and something I can pass on as my contribution and my legacy to other youth and other generations ahead of me. And I feel that my life has been meaningful and fulfilling and rewarding in that sense. But this is just a continuation of that struggle that went back to 1492, that ongoing struggle. And we will continue to struggle until we reach victory. We will reach victory.
So how does this book fit into that, into your story?
Well, I think that it's a book that I believe has been calling out to be published, and finally, thanks to Red Nation, Red Press, Common Notions Press, to key individuals like yourself, Melanie, and Jennifer Nittedale, Dr. Larry Emerson, and others who encouraged me to take up my pen and to write my thoughts and my experiences and my remembrances of those experiences during that turbulent time in the 1970s. The height of my activism was from the late 1960s to the early 1970s, and this was when I was a teenager and up to about the age of 30. And I can truly say that I gave the best years of my life to the movement in terms of organizing, in terms of working in leadership positions with activist organizations, and working at the local level, local, regional, national, and international levels. And finally, in 1981, after I had done, I'd finished my international work and had passed it on to other young people that I was working with to continue, I decided to write this book. One day I'm going to write this book. That was in 1981. But I still had more work to do. But this would be in the area of research and writing and speaking and other forms of advocacy and activism. But it wouldn't be in organizing and leadership, because you can only be effective for so long. And so I made the deliberate decision to move on. You move on, and you create room for others. And so I felt it was a time to move into other areas, and there's other things I could do, and one of them was writing. Whether it was newspapers, newsletters, booklets, essays, speeches, other forms of thought and expression. And so I went. I chose that as my next stage of my life's work, and I continued that for 31 years or so. But the most exciting part, was for me was at that time I was at the front lines and in the trenches. And it's a story that that really hadn't been properly written. The best book written about that period was Fortitude, The Continuing Indian Wars, written by Bruce Johansson and Roberto Maestas. And I wrote the introduction to that. They asked me to write the introduction to that, and they also asked me to help them on the section on the Southwest. And I had met them in 1976 during the Trail of Indian Self-Determination. And it was similar to the Trail of Broken Treaties, the Trail of Broken Treaties, 1972. This was the 1976 and it was to protest the bicentennial, the American bicentennial. And it started as a result of the backlash that was occurring in the Pacific Northwest that Carol referred to, because there was a lot of non-Indian, anti-Indian activity there, including like Hank Adams had been shot while he was asserting his fishing rights, and Ramona Bennett, tribal chairwoman, had to take up guns to protect her children, and just being in the nitty-gritty of the fishing rights wars that was going on. But politically and legally, the forces were gathering to make it a national movement to end subsistence fishing rights, which were guaranteed by treaty. So it's not only an attack against our livelihood, our subsistence rights, but also the treaty relationships and the trust responsibility that flows from that. So it's an attack on our very existence and our survival. And it was becoming part of a very powerful national movement. So that there had to be an Indian response to that. The situation was escalating. The situation was getting worse. So one of the things that came out of the Indian response was the Trail of Broken Treaties, or the Trail of Indian Self-Determination. And among the leadership was Sid Mills, Yakima leader who'd worked with Hank Adams, and then there was as part of the leadership, Roberto Maestas and Bruce Johansson were reporters. They were going to report on the trail, and but they were also very active in the Seattle area. And when they came through Albuquerque, we had a regional rally, and I met with Roberto and Bruce, and they said that they were going to write a book, about this, the continuing Indian wars. And so I gave them a lot of information, and that they would present to the people they were going to meet with in Washington, D.C. regarding the Southwest. And when they came back, they briefed us on the meetings that they had and the follow-up and the manifesto they had issued, and they wanted, that renewed their commitment to write the book. And so that when the book was finally written or published in 1980, it was very well received in Indian country. There were favorable reviews from Vine Deloria Jr., from Vernon Bellecourt, from Hank Adams, and other legendary leaders at that time who were very much part of the struggle and well-respected figures in Indian country. But the section on the Southwest and the section during the continuing Indian wars, particularly in the 1970s, that was the best that had been written. So I wanted to add to that, and also to add to other struggles that that were ongoing throughout the 70s. It wasn't just for a certain period of time. It had been ongoing, and I felt that I myself was influenced by the Red Nation, by the New Indians, written by Stan Steiner. It wasn't that Stan Steiner so much; he was a white guy, but the voices and the statements that were made by these legends, Herb Blatchford, Clyde Warrior, Mel Tom, Hank Adams, Shirley Whitt, leaders of the National Indian Youth Council, that inspired me, and that deeply influenced me. I'd read that when I was a senior in high school. Actually, it was between my junior and senior year when the book came out in the summer of 1968, and that and attending the National Indian Youth Council's Clyde Warrior Institute in American Indian Studies and the material that they handed out during the 6-week summer session or workshop that they had at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And what they called the Blue Book, the American Indian Handbook. And it had all the, these writings and these essays by Robert Thomas, Cherokee, one of our professors there. He'd written about colonialism and that, back in 1966, 1967, Vine Laurier Jr. was finishing up his law school studies and had written several chapters from his upcoming book, The Custer Died for Your Sins, Indian Manifesto, that would come out later in 1969. He also lectured to our class along with Dr. Thomas, and it was what you get out of it. I was 17 years old when I was part of that institute. I just graduated from high school, and then here I am talking to Vine Laurier Jr. and Robert Thomas, and I was just all agog, and just learning all this stuff about colonialism and treaties, and it was just a perfect way, to get introduced to the Red Power movement at that level. And then we had 150 other students, 2 from other institutes. One was at UCLA, and the other was in Stout State University. There were 50 students each at each institute. And at the end, after the 6-week sessions, we gathered together at the NIYC's annual meeting in Albuquerque. It was held in Albuquerque, and I got to meet all these people, and just listening about the work that they were involved in, and many of them were involved in the fishing wars up north, and they talk about going hand-to-hand combat with the state police, and it was just truly inspiring. This is where I want to be. I want to be with these people, these warriors. This warrior class that Herb Blatchford talked about, and so that was my introduction to it. Just very influential, and just that just made more firm the path to my life's work.
Wow. And what you just said, what a remarkable way at the age of 17, to be introduced to this path. As you said, John, I almost felt like destiny. I think it was. I think you were destined to do this work, and the emphasis that you place on legacy and your transition after 1981 to writing, I think is also something that a lot of us who do this work today. I mean, I didn't become politicized until I was maybe in my late 20s or my early 30s. I was a late bloomer. I was not 17 when I came into activism or doing this kind of work on behalf of our people. And so you have truly lived your entire life in this way, and you've walked this path. And this book just covers 1 decade, or not even quite 1 decade, one chunk of what you've done. And your writing, I think sometimes maybe in the movement there is this idea that we have to be engaged in the hand-to-hand combat aspect, right? Or that frontline direct action kind of struggle. And as you say, we've been at war since 1492, and we are still in a state of war. And sometimes you have to be that. You have to be the warrior in the moment, with those you feel at home with other warriors whom you trust in that warrior class or that warrior society. And that is instrumental, right, to just protecting who we are and being able to survive through continued cycles of conquest. But the writing is also very important. It's the quieter aspect, I would say, that sometimes we don't put as much emphasis on. And maybe we don't see that as a type of part of this commitment to walking this path, right? Or a type of action in and of itself. And you're both writers, from for a long time, 50 years now. You've both been longer, Carol, because you're a journalist. you're a writer. You said you had to learn how to write, you know, in order to contribute to just the protection of our people and land and water rights. And so I'm wondering if you both could talk a little bit more about what is the importance, do you think, of writing and research and what we think of as intellectual work to movements, you know, or just to defending our people and land and water. I'll start with you, John, and then Carol. Do you want to make some comments?
Yes, you know, I was inspired by writing, and there were prolific writers. You know, Herb Latchford had a number of writings, and you know, some of them appeared in the New Indians, and there were others that were unpublished that he later showed me, and just the thought and the thought and the expression and the intelligence and the thoughtfulness and the intellect and, you know, the native way of thinking. You know, it was just pure. It was just pure. And, you know, that was true for Clyde Warrior, for Mel Tom, for Shirley Whitt, you know, and I didn't know Hank Adams real well, but, you know, I later read a lot of his work, and he was, of course, the principal author of the 20 Points of 1972, which was the manifesto of the Trail of Broken Treaties, and just you know, just native thought, native expression, but also based on experiences. You know, also being part of the fish-ins and the, you know, the confrontations and the intertribal action and the visions, and you know, it's just I wanted to be part of that, to contribute to that, and you know, I thought that, you know, if I were to, you know, I remember when I was 17, I was, you know, like in mid-June 17, I get, you know, I was going to go to the Clyde Warrior Institute workshop the following week or something like that. I remember thinking, I would like to write a book one day about important things, but I didn't really know what important things were.
At 17, you had that thought.
Yeah, and you know, I had that thought, and then you know, reality check. I didn't really, you know that much at age 17, but you know, early stirrings, you know, and so this book here is kind of a dream come true for that, you know, and so, you know, today is a very special day for me.
Sorry, that actually making me emotional. Actually, you were 17. I was what, 55 years ago or so?
Something like that, you know.
Like, damn, John. That's that. If ever there's a commitment to emulate for those of us who, I mean, I'm not that young. I'm in my early 40s, you know, and there are remarkable people half my age, you know, who are picking up the mantle of this long struggle. But I mean, you truly model commitment for us. And yeah, seriously, I'm having to wipe away some tears right now to think that this is a 55-year journey. And it's just very, I don't know, it's very beautiful to me to be able to be a part of a dream of a 17-year-old radical, right? That is literally why we play this game, as our comrade Demetrius says. This is why we do this work. Because there's a 17-year-old radical coming into their own right now who's probably having that same dream. And whatever groundwork that we lay generationally in this long struggle for Native liberation is, and a return to who we are, right, as Indigenous people. Like, this is why we do this work. It's why we continue to come back, no matter how hard it is, how long it takes for some of these things to happen. It's why we started this press. And I don't know, it's, again, this is kind of a full circle moment for me as well. So I just wanted to say that, because yeah, I was actually starting to tear up a little bit when you said that. But anyway, this is not about me. Carol, if you wanted to answer the question about what is the role of writing you know, within this work, within the
Yeah.
activism and the struggle?
They the whole idea, you know, when I started, I thought, you know, gee, I don't know what I'm doing. Then, but the guys at the Nevada State Journal told me that I was on the right track. I would read the newspaper before I even knew these guys, like word for word, and look at their style, look at the use of their words, just basically study how they did things, how they wrote. And then when I actually started writing news copy, it was for the water issue. It was on the water issue, and it was directed towards the not the Native Nevadan, but the Nevada State Journal. And I would sit there and watch him edit me, and then we'd discuss uh, why he did what he did with the words that I used, why he substituted words. And at one point, he told me that I have to be more objective. And I backed off and said, there is no such word objective when you're dealing with water rights, especially if somebody's stealing your water. You're not going to be objective. You can't be objective. You have to take a side. And in this case, my side was with Pyramid Lake. And as an Indian, the Indian side of things. So objectivity went out the window when it came to me. I told him, I will write my stories for you, and you can edit however you want. But don't tell me to take the Native Nevadan objectively, because I will not do it. And I didn't. So I would ask people to write me stuff for the Nevadan. I had to encourage people to write articles for the Nevadan. And I would always get, well, I don't know how to write. And I said, you can talk. Yeah. Well, write the way you talk. And it was fun because it was Indian talk, or dangling participles and wrong adjectives, and who named it was all in there. I didn't care. It made sense to me, and that's what we went with. And it was something I did not really care to fix, because it was their words and it was their talk.
Absolutely.
So I always encouraged that among folks that tell me I don't know how to write. And if you can talk, you can write. Now, but if you want to get professional about it, okay, here's a dictionary, go for it. And here's a style book. And this is how they want you to put words together. But if you want to be an Indian writer, you go with the heart. And
What a quote.
I was thinking about John when he was talking about how he was influenced by different writers, and aside from all the work that he's done and that I've seen and I've read, the one that stands out the most to me is he wrote a foreword to a book that I I did the graphics on it. It was a nice, beautiful 17 by 14 coffee table book, R.C. Gorman. And it was for a printing, a lithograph shop that was my clients, and I worked with them on them producing Gorman prints, and then they decided to do a book on it, and of course I got the job because they were my clients, and they decided they wanted John to do the foreword. And I told John, they want you to do the foreword for Gorman's book, Marcia Gorman's book. I don't know nothing about art, he said. But he did. And he wrote, I think it's a classic. It's great. One of the, Nancy, the lady who owned the litho shop, almost came to tears after she read it. And because to her it was beautiful. And it was something that I don't think John knew that he could do. But it was really pretty. For old activists, gung ho, fire breathing, Navajo activist, he comes out with this flower, so to speak. So you don't know what you can do until you do it, And then he had the forward in Maestro's book, But I like to encourage people to write. I have a friend who likes to write, and she sends me emails of some of her writings, but she likes words. She likes to use words unnecessarily, let me put it that way, or big words when in fact she can use a little one. And so, I've been trying to ease her down away from that and get her back to the way she is, the way she pretends. That's what I think it is. She pretends. It's good. What she does is good, but she likes to get melodramatic with her words. But I in a young person, I think they should just sit down and write the way they talk.
Yeah.
And if you look at Indian English, which is what I call it. Now you see it on TV in Res Dogs.
Yep.
Isn't that wonderful? I think it's great. I love the way those kids talk. I love the whole thing about the talk in that. And here they they got you away from it. And some of the best stories is Indian story using Indian talk. And it's even funnier if you do it in a native language, but I like people to just jump in it, both feet, and go for it. And when I was doing the native, I tried to get people to write stuff about their community, what's going on, and then that's when I would hear, I don't know how to write. I don't, just write it the way you talk. Even call me on the telephone and I'll write whatever you tell me. But yeah, I really like to encourage the young and the old and the middle to think about the most influential thing that happened in your life and write it down. Or maybe some history you would like you share with your grandchildren maybe a history that you leave for them to read. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to come from the heart. You tell your story, and you and they'll, when they read it, they'll say, "Oh, that's the way she talks." You don't you don't have to be all with the big words and the the correct English type of thing. But yeah, just go for it. I mean, I think I just kind of gave up. I got burned out basically because of the amount of work that I was doing, Indian work. I was also was one of the editors that fed material to the American Indian Press Association in DC so that they can send it out to other people. And I would get stuff in from Richard, who was our news director, and he would say, take a look at it, edit, and send it back. And the editing was done to shorten, because we only had so much space to work with, so we shortened it. That's how I learned to do Indian editing. When I saw when we did the editing on John's book, we fixed a lot of it.
The official copy editing, you
Yes.
mean? Yeah. Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
And
That's a really important part of the process.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so hopefully the people on the other end will realize that there's a certain way that we have to deal with things on our end.
Yep.
To make it acceptable to our people,
Exactly.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that has been my experience with mainstream publishing as well. The edits or the suggestions for editing, I have to correct a lot of it. Be like, no, I'm not going to say it this way. Like, you're not going to refashion this sentence. It's not going to make sense. Because what you saying, Carol, Indian talk, and then John, you were talking about these, powerful leaders, the vanguard of NIYC, really exhibiting this very sharp native way of thinking in a pure form. I think your memoir and your book, you write this way too. You both write in Indian talk in a very straightforward manner, but there's also such an incredible intellectual sharpness, and the research is immaculate in this book. I just wanted to let everyone know this, as it is with all of John's work. And it really truly exhibits that native way of thinking that he's talking about when he was 17, that he saw, right, in these legends who inspired him to do what he's doing. And Carol, you talking about John's introduction to this R.C. Gorman coffee table book. John, you're a true writer, I think. It's a craft and an art for you. And so all of that together, it's so rare. I mean, it's hard to communicate and to convey to people listening how rare that is to find in our relatives, who are in the movement, who are writers, who are voracious readers and intellectuals, who are writing for our own people. So much of what is published by Native people is written for a white audience. Let's be honest about that. We don't do that at Red Media Press. I never write to white audiences. When we do our podcast episodes, that's not who we have in our mind when we're addressing people in public. We're really trying to speak to our own people and, channel, right, that native way of thinking, that Indian talk. And again, a lot of that is because of how you conduct yourself, John, Carol, your legacy, and how you've done this work. And I think truly this book represents that. I know we're probably going to be at time here really soon. I wanted to ask you one more question, John, and if there's any Q&A from the audience here live, or those folks who are listening to the live stream. our two diehards here in the audience live in person. Yeah. So John, how do the experiences that you talk about in this memoir, how might they influence or inspire activism today? I think especially young Native people who are picking up the mantle of struggle.
Well, there's patterns, repeating patterns, like the work that we did on the coal gasification issue in the 1970s. Because the coal was there, and we were successful in large part in preventing these monster coal gasification plants from being built. It was mainly the people's resistance to that. It wasn't the lawsuits. It was on the ground resistance, and that threatened the capital investment, to go into financing the gasification plants. It was the spirit of the people. It was the on the land struggle, resistance struggle, that did that. The people were not going to be defeated there. And the enemy finally finally realized that, they're not gonna risk their capital investment and putting it in, in a place, in a location that, where the resistance is unbeatable, is unconquerable. There's no way they can police that. And it was the same kind of, and when the move to develop the Desert Rock Energy Project surfaced in 2003, and Dina Kerr and the Dota Dene, or Dota Desert Rock, the matriarchs up there, some of them who were part of the struggle in the 1970s, said, no way, no way, Dota, I mean, no compromise, and, no surrender when, there could be no sellouts. We're going to beat this thing like the way we did before, except that, we're older, we're wiser, we have children. The reason we have children is to carry on the struggle, the constant struggle, and we're not going to be beat here. Even though there were people saying, well, we think you should, work on cleaning up the Four Corners power plant and the San Juan power plant, and let these newer, safer power plants come in. And the ladies, the grandmother said, no, don't talk. And so that, it was an absolute position there. And so, I worked with, I was a consultant with Dina Kerr at that time, and the Dota Desert Rock Committee, they were, they came together under Dina Kerr's community organizing work. Dina Kerr was able to, get them some money and open up, different kinds of opportunities to express their resistance. And I knew some of the women's parents who were part of the 70s struggle. And so it was intergenerational, but also, and they knew of my work there. And so I was able to, to provide a lot of advice and direction to the collaboration between the committee and Dina Kerr, and, a lot of the war stories that came out there. It all, it all came together into the successful campaign, and, Desert Rock, was defeated basically in 2010. So, I talked about my experiences, I shared information, and talked about other struggles like in Northern Cheyenne, Fort Berthold, and other places in which Native people were facing these coal threats. So, I made it, they were able to see the big picture and the long view, that this work is intergenerational. We have to teach our children, this is for keeps. This is the way we, can defeat the monster. We just keep coming after them. We keep coming after them. We take the fight to them. Yeah, yeah. And there is no compromise. There is no surrender. The situation is absolute. We keep the ground. We keep the coal in the ground. The coal is the liver of Mother Earth. So, it was, it was drawing into, my experiences in the 60s and the 70s. And, just going out there many times and sitting around the campfire and sharing that information and answering questions. Many of them came from the young people. And that's where we got much of our strength and our energy from. And there was emerging leadership within Dene Care that are now taking on other struggles. But they came into it as young people. They were part of the struggle to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And this is an environmental or New Age philosophy or whatever. That comes from the Emma Yazzi's and the Roberta Blackcoats, of the Cold Wars back in the 70s. And it's not only me, but also other elder warriors, grandmother warriors that were part of that I learned so much from. Emma Yazzie and Roberta Blackcoat, and some of the warriors that I knew in the northern Great Plains and then the Black Hills. It was so much of it came from the elders, and so that I think a great impact in organizing and uniting the folks and giving them strength. So I was able to to kind of put that together as an elder or a mentor, but it was something that came directly from my experiences and the lessons that I learned, and learning about the strengths and the weaknesses of the enemy, and that the struggle to go after the coal, the fossil fuels will always be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we need to always be vigilant and always be on guard. We can't become complacent. And, so, it's the threat is relentless. It's a part of the constancy of struggle. That's why we have children. That's why we need to teach our children about these traditions of resistance, and to continue to be on guard all the time, because those threats will always be there. It's like you're at Pyramid Lake. We have there's a settlement there, but there's also the threats are out there. Fernley is expected to double its population in a very short time, and they plan to not only expand Fernley itself, but also to expand towards Silver Springs. You have this industrial park, USA Parkway, and they're planning to industrialize that area with a big data center, and all of these things require water.
Yeah.
The lithium at Thacker Lake, another one, and the threats are will always be there.
Yeah.
We have to always be warriors for our people, and because the nature of the enemy, the nature of the beast, and so it's just like each generation is born into that. Each generation has a responsibility, and so if we talk about traditions of resistance and lessons that we learn so that we'll be more effective, and this is lifetime work. It's intergenerational work, and so it goes back to purpose and responsibility in life. And so I always tell people to take the long view,
Mhm.
and to always have that larger picture, because it's out there. The more you get into, it's out there, and that came from Herb Blatchford. Having that view. always having that view, that came from an elder, and he got that from his elders. He was the seventh born of the seventh born, and that's the way he was taught. And he was a veteran of many wars, very wise, and that I learned so much from 1975 to 1988.
People like myself, don't don't go out in the trenches and do things. That's why I content myself with doing research and writing fact sheets kind of thing in order to help those that go out into the field. So, like right now, I'm gathering information on this AI thing. I see it popping up on Facebook using Indian stuff. You can tell it's fake. It's not photographs. It's not painting. It's you can tell it's AI generated, and some of it is very wrong. But they're promoting it. Well, it's obviously to them, to the white man, it's going to be their future. But like the AI computer system with their servers and the data centers, AI and data centers and these servers. The servers are going to require at least almost 100% more water than a regular computer server.
Right.
And that's because AI is so what do you call it? It contains so much computerized data to make it work. Codes. That's what. Yeah, they use so much codes in just to make a body move, and so they're building one out in the Parkway, and they're going to have these servers. And right now, the question is, where are they going to get the water?
Yeah.
I wrote that they selected Nevada because Nevada has the land for them to come in and build on. But it's also the driest state in the nation. Where are they going to get their water? They're going to steal it from the farmers and the ranchers and the Indian tribes. So in order to combat that, I'm in the process of pulling together stuff on AI, on that thing that they're building out there, who's behind it, and what possibly could be the future for the tribes. And not only Pyramid Lake, but also but also the Reno Sparks area, the little small tribes scattered all over the state. And right now, they're also, if that data center is going to need that amount of water, it's going to end up like Las Vegas, where Las Vegas wanted to pump out underground waters from ranchers in Utah, on western Utah side, along eastern Nevada, all down that whole area, just pump out all the underground water that's available to Las Vegas so they continue with their uncontrolled expansion. But that was that apparently was halted temporarily. But you never can trust these guys. You know.
Relentless, like John said.
Yeah, and it's the tribes and the ranchers and everybody up and down that whole area that where they were going to take that water from. They're just help themselves. They got together and stopped them, and it took people to put together fact sheets on those things, make it short and simple, and this is what they're going to do. This is who's behind it, and go for it. Let the people organize over that. Yeah.
Right.
So
That's correct.
Well, couple things before we go to Q&A. Right now, just speaking from the Navajo context, our president's trying to open coal back up. Coal is back on the table in the Navajo Nation. They're holding, the tribal council right now is trying to hold these town halls, which, by the way, aren't just for Navajo citizens. They're for anyone. So there's all, the coal industry is bussing in all of these people. There's all these Bilagana people who are attached to the industry who are really trying to, submit public comments, really trying to take over the process to convince, Navajo Nation to open up coal development again. And, the message from you, John, speaking, right? What is the importance of this work? The intergenerational nature of traditions of liberation and traditions of struggle. Say this to anyone who's listening, especially our Navajo relatives, channeling what John said. Like, our position is uncompromising, and it must be uncompromising. It's absolute. There's no surrender. There was no surrender in 1974, right, on Black Mesa against Peabody Coal, and that's the same today in 2025. There's no question. There's no question about whether or not we should be doing this. We just simply should not be doing this, period. And this is the position that all of our elders in struggle all of these decades have shown us, including John. And we must fight this with everything that we have. The future of our species, the future of our planet depends upon this in this era of climate change, where we have less than 50 years, is what we have been told. And so I don't even know why there's a discussion about this. And I have no doubt that there will be elders, from the struggle in these coal wars, because the coal war has also not ended, at least for our people, as well as these new generations, the 17-year-olds, these baby radicals who are coming into their own, that we will all be engaged in intergenerational struggle if this touches down and becomes a potential reality for our people again, because we absolutely cannot allow this to happen ever on our land. And so, John, speaking of how your work relates, right, how it inspires and influences what we're struggling with today, there's such a clear through line, I think, with what's happening in the Navajo Nation. So here to wrap up, are there any questions from our audience members who are listening to the live stream? And then I'll make a couple more comments and we'll conclude it there.
Hello. Excuse me. I am testing this. We got a couple good comments and questions. One of them is from Jennifer Marley. She says, John, I was moved to tears reading just the first chapter of your book. It reminded me of my time in Kiva Club. What advice do you have for older organizers looking to develop new young leaders? Also, she is interested in learning about how you all built Pueblo Diné Solidarity. She so appreciates name dropping of the Pueblo activists in the book because they are often erased in our communities.
Well, the Kiva Club I've always had a relationship with since the 1970s. I was a member of the Kiva Club from 1973 to 1974, although I worked with Kiva Club from 1972 to 1973 with Larry Cassous. But Kiva Club did honor the work and the sacrifice and the legacy of its president, the late great Larry Cassous, and the many achievements and accomplishments that he did or was responsible for, or at least setting into motion. And these were often the main reason for the Larry Cassous Memorial Series, which was held in the 70s and the 80s, in the 90s and the 2000s, up to about 2013 or 2015, I believe. And so, the proud history of Kiva Club and the milestones that they achieved from their activism, which resulted in the establishment of the Native American Studies Center in 1970. Many of them were members of NIYC, and many of them were Pueblos, such as Jerry Cordova, Taos Pueblo, Conor Chino, Acoma Pueblo, Ron Garcia, Laguna Pueblo, Kathy Marmon, Laguna Pueblo, Isleta. And so, these names, Delphine Lovato, San Juan Pueblo. And so, there are many, Simon Ortiz, Acoma Pueblo, the names of our Pueblo warriors, who were activists at a very early age, and who went on to be leaders of their tribal nations. They had much of the training and the education, and just the skills and the qualities that they learned and refined, at Kiva Club, and it's something that hasn't really been written about. There are, of course, leaders such as Alfonso Ortiz, going back to in the 1950s, Joe Abeda, and just the names of just intergenerational there, and just so many great Pueblo people that we worked with, like Manuel Pino and Christine Zuni, and I mentioned many of them, or some of them, in my book. There's so much more that could be written. Each chapter could be a book into itself, and I would like for that to perhaps happen at some point. But you've had I know that there have been podcasts with, like, Verna Williamson. She was with NIYC in the 1970s, and her work at Fort Lewis College, and then Simon Ortiz, and then Patuch, Gilbert, and just so many of our warriors, and the Navajo Pueblo unity and coalition goes way back to the time of the Pueblo Revolt. It wasn't only Pueblos, but also Navajos, Apaches, Utes. It was an intertribal revolt against a common enemy. Just like the Little Bighorn, that was intertribal as well, regional and intertribal. And after the so-called Reconquest, then many of the Pueblos went up to seek sanctuary among their Diné brothers and sisters in Dineta, and there became a bicultural civilization built up there, in those ruins, in old Dineta, and there was what they call bicultural fluorescence, where the best of the cultures came together. And you didn't have any BI, you didn't have any white man, you didn't have any Spanish, you didn't have any Mexican. It was indigenous. It was based on cooperation and just a neighborhoodship that's really always been there. And so, that too needs to, I think, receive more historical treatment when we talk about coalition building between Pueblos and Navajos, because it goes back to to even pre-Columbian times, and certainly, came about when we faced three generations of, uh, of wars against the Spanish and the Mexicans, and now the Americans. So the strengths that can be built on is enormous. But we need to know that history, and only that history can come from us. You can't expect to get it from white textbooks or a lot of it is in our oral history. There's so much richness there. I remember when Al Ortiz would talk about the inadequacies of the Western history of the Native people in the Southwest. He talked about the wrong people telling the wrong story, and that's always resonated with me. I mean, that's one of the things that really was the driving force behind writing this book, because it is for primarily a Native readership. It was originally written for my comrades who were there during the 1970s. In my self-published version, I dedicated it for those who were there, and starting with the Cubicle class of 1973, those of us that came together after Larry Casus gave his life. And many of us were working with Larry before that time. We knew of his enormous dedication and commitment and love for Native people. And I would like to collaborate, with latter-day historians to talk about, just the intertribal organization and unity, that was also alive during many of the campaigns that NOIC took during the 1970s. The work out at Cochiti, work at Tesuque, work with the Pueblo governors against the Bernalillo County School District, the hate crimes against Pueblo people, William Mondalesi in the mean streets of Albuquerque during that time, the coalition building between Navajo people and Pueblo people and other tribal, and building the Albuquerque Indian Center. NOIC was a big part of that, and putting together urban Indian coalition and knowing that. So there's so much that can be written, and this is just a part of it, but I hope it inspires other people to take up your pen, and make this part of a continuing series. We through Red Nation, through Red Media, we now have the capacity to do that. Not only written text, but also oral text too. Because we're an oral people. I mean, just the stories that Simon Ortiz tells. I mean, he's a poet, and he carries on the oral tradition. But if you spend any time with with somebody like Simon, he has all these stories. I mean, there's so many unwritten stories that he has. Just such a resource that he has, and other and other people like him who have who have lived and experienced and have so much to tell and to share with with future generations and with the future our future warriors, or the warrior class, the warrior society. So I think I'm hoping that this creates opportunities for that, and opportunities to to build on this, because there's quite a collection that that Red Media is already building with. This is the second, but there's also David Correa's book, and Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's book, and Nick Essens's books. there's so much work to do. You know, and I'm just glad to be part of this continuation, and I hope to inspire other young people, to to work, you work and fight in the struggle, and then when you get to be an elder like me, and you can retire and and be able to have the time and space to do that, by all means. Like, when I came up here to Pyramid Lake in 2012, after I retired in my early 60s, and I wanted to write 4 books. I ended up writing 5 books in 7.5 years. So I knew I was going to, I was driven. I knew I was going to get health problems, in my early 70s, and sure enough, I got health problems. But I had to, here at Pyramid Lake was the right venue to do that, and I feel that I had a very fulfilling and very productive time here in my working retirement.
Any other questions or comments? I will say, you heard that right, folks. John has written 5 books. And so I would like to impress upon people how prolific John's work is. The amount of things that actually, his speeches and his writings from this period of the 70s that are to be found in his archive and his collections at the Center for Southwest Research at the University of New Mexico. And all of this work needs to be published. His essays, The Geopolitics of the Navajo-Hopi Land Dispute, legendary piece, one of the most influential pieces I've ever read as a young Navajo scholar, intellectual and activist. And so this is the tip of the iceberg, publishing this book. And hopefully it will not take another 55 years to publish the rest of those works. It's very important, I think, to have this work out in circulation. No, you're good? Any questions or comments from the audience here live?
For myself, I look forward to reading the book. It will be very, very awesome, and having a connection to Pyramid Lake. And early on, I was involved with the National Indian Youth Council, as well as the American Indian Movement. So the work, as you say, it continues on, and we need to encourage our youth to be educated as far as our history and our culture and our current issues. So being here as the director for the Pyramid Lake Museum, we do focus on history and culture, but also our current challenges with the lithium mining and other types of mining that are threats to our environment, what's going on with the water issues, because the water issue, it's getting worse.
Yeah.
And so the threats out there with overdevelopment,
Yeah.
the industrial parks, these data centers that are being proposed, we really have to keep a very close eye on what's going on to protect our water, our land, and other resources. The earth,
Yep.
It's very important. We're caretakers of the earth, so
Ooh.
we've got to remember that.
Yeah.
We have to encourage our youth to be involved in protecting it as well.
Absolutely. And thank you again. This is the director of the Pyramid Lake Museum, where we're holding this live stream, for welcoming us and allowing us to use this space. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And for all of your contributions as well to the struggles that we're talking about. No more questions or comments? We're good?
I think so.
Okay.
Just a quick announcement for our listeners on the live stream. This is the first of 3 live streams and 4 events total. Our next event will be in Albuquerque, New Mexico at Books on the Bosque. You can find event information at www.redmedia.press/events. And we're looking forward to it. If you tuned in late to this live stream, don't worry, we have 2 more coming up. And our final event will be at the Gallup Flea Market this Saturday. So if you can join us in person, please wait to buy the book from Red Media in person. Otherwise, you can purchase the book from Common Notions Press.
And just one final announcement for Red Media. I forgot to say this at the beginning. I always do this, but please join our Patreon. Pretty much like 90% of our funding in Red Media comes from our Patreon subscribers. Thank you so much to those of you who do subscribe. That money goes towards the operation costs, obviously, of the organization, but the money that you contribute to Red Media actually is part of the reason why this book was possible, right? To be able to, again, to make the dreams of a 17-year-old young Indigenous radical come true 55 years later. Like, this is what these resources go towards. And this is why it's important for us to continue that. So please consider joining our Patreon, or just consider donating to Red Media, because this is what you're contributing to. It's this, right? You're contributing to this intergenerational, right? The tradition of liberation that we all belong to. And it's essential for us, to be able to get this work out into the world. John, any last words that you would like to share before we close out?
No, I'll defer to Carol, if she has any closing comments.
Carol, have any closing comments before we end the live stream?
Boy, you caught me off guard. No,
Sorry.
my mind was,
Okay.
yeah.
No worries. Okay. Well, I'm going to end on the words that John himself shared a little bit earlier. We will have victory. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a lovely day. We good? Aw.